tomorrow, so.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. This is an interview with Harry Hayes, the Ramada Inn, Watertown, New York, the 23rd of April, 2003. It's approximately 2:30 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Harry C. Hayes. Charles is the middle. I was born in Creighton, Ontario, Canada, October 16, 1920.
And what was your educational background prior to entering military service?
Came out of high school prior to the service, yeah.
All right. When did you move from Canada to the United States?
Oh, I was probably 2 years old, so it would have been 22 or 23.
Okay. Do you recall where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
It was a Sunday afternoon in Black River, and a bunch of us were walking down the street and speculating what's going to happen next after we heard Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you know what your initial reaction was?
I don't really. I didn't have any great fear or anything. See, they had been enlarging. It used to be Pine Camp, and we worked there while we were enlarging it, and we just got out of the job was over, and Pearl Harbor came, and then I went on to Rochester to work, and from Rochester, I was drafted in Watertown, came back and went into service in September 17th of 42, I guess.
Okay, so you were drafted. Where did you go for your induction?
Fort Niagara.
Okay, and did you do any training there at all? Or?
No.
Okay.
We were there probably 5 days, and all of a sudden they put us on a train, said nothing, and we didn't know anything where we were going until suddenly they stopped the train. You're in the Air Corps, this is Miami Beach.
Okay, what kind of basic training did you receive while you were in Miami Beach?
Very good. I was put into a separate unit. I don't know exactly what they had what their intentions were. It was called the Guard and Administrative Detachment, and they took a few of us out of the Air Corps. I never knew how I got into it, but there was, way up the beach, there was a big hotel, the Shoremead, and it was full of officers. And we lived in a hotel across from it, 2 men to a room, and the first sergeant would get us out in the road and do all this close order drill. We were good. Not just plain marching back and forth, we'd go off this way and back, and the people in the hotel, the officers, were watching quite often because they thought we were doing real good. And that lasted, well, from September, I got down there, and until April of 43, I think, they sort of, I guess the thing wasn't going to work out the way they thought it was, so they put us back in the Air Corps. But it was a whole winter in Miami Beach. And the only training we did was that, and then we'd go and swim in the ocean and stuff. But it was easy duty. And interesting, I think, is that David Rockefeller, out of that Rockefeller family, he was a corporal in our outfit. He didn't live with us. He stayed up in Lagos Island or someplace. His wife would bring down his Cadillac car. Nice guy. He was corporal. And I know one night he came in and woke me up to go on guard duty, and it wasn't my turn. And he, very apologetic and everything. And then his wife invited 3 or 4 of us to come out to their home a couple times for dinner during that time we were there. And this first sergeant, who really wasn't too intelligent, he tried to tell us, well, you go and you have a drink with your host and that, give us some manners. She heard it. Her name was Peggy. And she said, these boys are away from home, and we are too, and we want them to come, stay as long as they want to stay, and have as good a time as we can have. And we did. I tell you, it was fun. But then she had 3 or 4 of us come out another time for dinner, and I sat right next to David at dinner one night, and he was asking, where were you from? Turned out he had been up at Black River when they dedicated the USO Club to it was just on the edge of Black River going into Fort Drum. And one of the things that I thought was funny was I never had been where they had servants, Mrs. Rockefeller's at the head of the table, and she'd dingle, and out they'd come, from a kid from the country. It's quite impressive. But then he went away, and I understood he went and earned his commission. And after the war, he worked in Europe and something about the rehabilitation. But it was just a wonderful duty. I mean, there was people in that outfit. One man was a master musician, and they let us go into the Firestone estate. The Army had taken that over, and I think they were training guys for espionage, because when we were doing guard duty, they'd come, they were in civilian clothes, and they would say, I'm so-and-so, I'm going downtown, and they'd come back and we'd let them in. Well, one night they let us go in there, and this man, his name was Jim Loader. He played the piano, and believe me, he was in the wrong place because he was talented. But that was the kind of my first few months in the service. Boy. And as I say, you couldn't help but enjoy it. And then I went back to Richmond, and they sent me up to Pauling, New York for cryptographer school. They found out I was born in Canada, so I was out. And then I went back to Richmond, and they sent me out to clerical school in Colorado, back to Richmond, and then they formed the 366 group in August of '43, and I went down to Wilmington, and believe me, we had a Colonel Meyer, who was CO of our fighter group. He wanted to go overseas, and we worked. There was no playing around then. And we went overseas either 1 or 2 days after Christmas. They took us up to Camp Miles Standish in Massachusetts, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 days after Christmas that we loaded on the Empress of Australia in Boston Harbor. I know I was sick. Oh God, I was sick. They put me in the hospital, and Campbell was the group surgeon. And I said, I haven't got to stay here, have I? Just stay overnight and you can go back. And I didn't want to miss it. Good God, we've been trained for a long time, And then our sergeant major, his name was Bob Carter. He had been a banker, I think. God, he was just a good administrator. And he got sick, and we practically carried him on board ship, and we put a bunch of duffel bags down and said, lie down until we get it off, out in the channel. That was the story of going overseas. And
did you go in a convoy or a single ship?
Oh, I heard that we were in the biggest convoy. The 4th Armored Division was in it, but we didn't see very many ships. We were up on deck as often as we could because it stunk so telling to hold. But we landed in Greenock, Scotland, and then we got off there, and the ladies were there with the little bag lunches, and then we got on a train and went down to Membry in England, and they trained there, and then we moved to a town called Thruxton, and that's where they flew the first missions.
Now, what kind of planes were in this fighter unit?
P-47s, Thunderbolts. Yes.
Okay. What were your relations like with the English people?
We got acquainted with a family near the base, and we'd go up to their, not often, but I remember going a few evenings to spend time with them. And of course, their windows were all blacked out, But that's about the only relationship we had with the natives, was just to meet them in the pubs. We'd go in a pub, and at 10 o'clock, the bartender, pint time, that meant you had to go home.
What kind of missions did the Thunderbolts fly?
Most of them were escort missions to the bombers like this guy. Although there were a lot of fighter sweeps when they were trying to get in on the beach.
What do you remember? I know you were talking earlier. What do you recall about D-Day, the night before D-Day? You were saying?
Well, all I can think of is, as I say, it felt like if you stuck your hand up, you're going to hit an airplane. It was just full of, it must have been because of the noise. And of course, we couldn't go back onto the base after we left it because it was security, I suppose, until the next day when we went down and realized that the invasion had started.
Okay. Now, did you remain in England throughout the war? Or
Oh, no.
Okay.
We were, now I'm going to say 10 days after D-Day. It may have been 12, but it was shortly after D-Day that we landed on Strip A1 in Normandy. Our planes had flown missions and landed there for service and gone back to England in the evening. But it was 10 or 12 days after D-Day. They moved a whole bunch of us over there. We lived in tents over a foxhole. And, well, I was out on the line, of course. Our operations tent was out close to the line, and I walked out most of the time. I could take a truck, but it was more fun walking. And we were there, I can't remember just when we left. We went to a town called Drew, D-R-E-U-X, and they had hangars and stuff there. And we weren't there very long, and then we went to a place called Leon Couvron. It was hyphenated. And we weren't there too long, and I think it was in October that we moved into Belgium. It's called Y-29. It was near ASCH, Ash, or Ash, Belgium. And we were there when New Year's Day. That was one day you'll never forget. Phone rings, the operations, German planes in the area. Well, Christ, this one pilot, his name was Taylor, Jet Taylor, nice guy. We'd go out to get in a foxhole, and it was full of pilots. So we stood at the corner of the building, get the son of a bitch. And it was like a football game. It was really exciting. And then, they let up, and pretty soon they'd come back again. And that was the way we spent New Year's Day. It was something, let me tell you. And then one of our pilots was shot down, or he crashed somewhere. Christ, he came riding in on a bicycle in the afternoon. I mean, stuff like this, it was just humorous, you had to laugh a little bit. But we did lose some pilots, and I'll tell you, you get to know people. Most of them were just plain ordinary nice guys. There was a fellow, did you ever see the fighter pilot story that Antonsen did? See it sometime. Quentin Antonsen, he was a pilot in one of the other squadrons, and he took it upon himself. He lives in Washington, I think. He did this story about his life in the service, and it's really worth watching. Anyway, it's in 2 tapes. It took long. But one of the things that I was so pleased about, he wrote about each pilot that he was friends with. And there was this one fellow, his name was James I. Taylor. He was 389th. He used to come over to our shack at night, eat popcorn, and just a nice guy. Anyway, Antonsen called me and said, "Will you give me some information on Jet Taylor?" So I gave him a picture. I had a real good picture. And in this tape that Antonsen made, he had a picture of each guy that he was talking about. And I thought, boy, I contributed to that picture. I was just, in fact, I got in touch with his brother. His brother was in the service. They live in Rhinebeck, Iowa, I think. And he told me that when the film was on public television, he called Antonsen. He said, "We talked for an hour." Well, naturally, there's a lot to talk about, But no, this Taylor was an exceptional guy, just plain nice guy. And most of them were not. Some of them. One guy, I don't want to mention any names. He was a major. He was up, and it was when we were in Belgium, and I forget what someone, the enlisted man, crew chief, did. And the guy said, "I'll take care of you when I come back." Well, he didn't come back from the mission. The guy, his crew, and they were doing war dances around the trees celebrating because he wasn't a nice guy. I mean, they didn't like him. But how much more do you want me to?
Whatever you want to tell us.
I have to tell about our cook, squadron cook named Smitty. He was from Buffalo. They sent him to communication school. This is from Richmond. He came back from communication school, all primed and ready. He worked one day in communications. They looked at his service record, found out he was a cook, and he was our squadron cook, and he was good. He could even make powdered eggs taste good. And he drank a lot, to excess. But he and I, for some reason, he liked me. He was, God love you, kid. What do you need? All this stuff. Anyway, in Richmond, he cooked Thanksgiving dinner. And we had a Major Hinckley, who was our executive officer. He had a seat on the stock exchange. Nice guy, but he affected English accent, sort of. He liked to put on the dog. His wife was a society girl from out west somewhere. Stedman, her name was. Anyway, Smitty's telling, they served the turkey dinner, and some of the officers' wives came, and Mrs. Hinckley sent for the cook. And of course, Smitty's figuring, Jesus, I left a bottle cap in the dressing or something, because he was usually in the cups. And Mrs. Hinckley wanted the recipe for the dressing. I mean, these things happen. Someone said you could write a book about Smitty. He got into trouble all the time, but he never quite got court-martialed. And when we went through Paris, going to Brussels, or wherever we stayed there in Bosch, he was riding the beer truck. I mean, he was the steward in the officers' club, of course, because he knew how to tend bar. And he got mad because the damn truck didn't stop in Paris. The whole bunch of us stopped. And anyway, he cracked open a case of gin or something, and he's sitting on top of this beer truck, or the booze truck, got loaded right to the gills. They ended up at the new base, and the colonel came out, not Colonel Meyer, came out and said, "Get down, stand at attention," and Smitty fell at his feet, drunker than hell. And the guy said he had to go back to England. He said, "I'll take care of you when I come back." Well, he went down in the channel, so Smitty's clear. Everything he did, he got into trouble. When we were in Belgium, no, an old building in Drew, I guess, the pilots fixed it up so they could live upstairs, 4 of them. And the ready room was downstairs, and the intelligence and we lived in the back end of it, 6 of us. Anyway, the pilots put a ladder up. They got some boards and made a ladder to go upstairs they asked Smitty to come down and make them some fudge one night. Of course, they gave him drinks. Finally, Lieutenant Mahoney, good guy from Massachusetts, "Sergeant, will you come help with the Smitty?" They had put a rope on him, let him down, because they didn't dare let him come down the ladder. And then it was my job. I had to get him back to where he lived and stuff. But it seemed I always ended up with Smitty, to look after. And we stayed friends all after the war. I used to think, he said, "God love you, kid. I'm coming up and meet Mom and Dad Hayes." I thought, Jesus, if he ever comes up and acts this way, they'll kick us both out. Well, he came up to my house, and I tell you, he got to be like one of our family. My mother and dad liked him. When they went to Florida, he had moved to Florida. They got together. My brother invited him one night to go on a hot dog roast with him and his girlfriend and a bunch of their friends. They said he sat across from the fire, smoke blowing in him. Of course, he's drunk again. And Sam said, "I never saw anyone drink so much." I thought, the next morning, I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to say put him out, but he stayed. He just stayed to be one of the best friends I ever had.
What was his full name?
George W. Smith. And as I say, he had a half-sister. I think he lived with her. She was a telephone operator. I stayed with them, in touch with him after the war, and Smitty would come up, or I'd go down there, and then when they moved to Florida, we always got together. And the last time he was home, I think, was in '88. He drove up and stayed for a few days with us, and drove back to Buffalo, and he died in the fall of that year, I believe. But no, it's those kind of people you don't ever forget, Could I tell you one more?
Sure.
One of our pilots, he looked almost albino. He was so blonde. His name was Edward H. Gross. And there again, he was one of these people that he didn't, he wasn't impressed with his rank. He just liked people. And he used to come over to our shack and sit and talk with us and stuff. And I went in Paris on task, I remember. Came back, and Carter, this kid that was our sergeant major, he said, well, you lost your friend Eddie Gross. And the story was, of course, that he got hit and went down. Anyway, after the war, this Smitty, he came up, and we were doing this sentimental journey, and we go down to Glens Falls, and we went to New York and called on a couple guys, went over to somewhere outside of Philadelphia. We had a fellow named John Nettleton. He was in communications, I guess. He also was a heavy, heavy drinker. and we went to see him, and we stayed overnight at his house. And I went back to the room and went to bed. He and Smitty went down and drank up the bar. Anyway, we went on over to Pittsburgh, and I called this Mr. and Mrs. Gross, the parents of this young fellow, and I said, would it bother you if we came to visit you? I just told them that we had liked their kid so much. Oh no, please come. So Smitty and I went out in the evening, and we just talked about the things, and they told how to, he was a nice kid. He'd go up to Canada hunting and fishing and had his dog and everything. And when we were ready to leave, I guess we went back the next morning to say goodbye to him, but they were so grateful. They said we were the only people other than the officials that come to tell of the demise of the person that had come to see them or been in touch with them. And I always figured these pilots were clannish, that two of them would be best friends, and you think, well, I'm going to see the parents of my best friend, but none of them ever did. And I stayed in touch with the lady, Mrs. Gross, until she died in, golly, it was the 60s sometime. I still got letters that I wrote. I went to see them in Florida at one time when they had moved down there. But this kid, he was just exceptional. And they were so grateful to think that someone took the time, to come and talk with them. But, and there again, it's one of these things at these reunions, like I told you, the guy asked me the name of this fellow that had never driven a car in New York City. And as I say, I've got all these records that I kept, and they'll ask questions, and I think, yeah, sure. And we were in Myrtle Beach, and a bunch of the pilots were over in the corner. Come over here, Hayes, we got one for you. And I said, I don't know what it was. I said, well, wait just a minute. I had the history with me. So I went up to the room, and I came back down, and I said, now this is what you're looking for, isn't it? Yeah, we knew you'd have it. But it was to me, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, living in the foxhole, the four of us put our pup tents together, and we got some straw, and there we slept in there. And of course, at night, those damn buzz bombs are going over. And they were scary because they'd shut off, and you didn't know. You knew they were going to go but when they shut off, you didn't know where they were going to land. And it was bad in Belgium too. I know we were in this little shack. Four of us put up a shack, and someone said, "Hey, buzz bombs!" We get up and put our tin hats and lie down like we're going to be safe with those damn things on. But no, as I looking back at it, I guess probably because it was such a new experience. Oh, in Miami Beach, I was in a room with a fellow named Wilmer Arnold. He was from down near Rochester someplace. Big, heavy man. Could dance like, oh God, he could dance crazy. He'd go up to the pier every night and dance. Well, anyway, come Christmas Eve, I remember looking out, and the Salvation Army was going up Collins Avenue, playing, I look around, here's Tiny, we call him Tiny, sitting on his bed crying. Oh, what the hell's wrong with you? Well, it's Christmas Eve. And I said, you're not in any worse shape than any of us. Cut it out. But as I say, some of the associations, really, you just can't ever forget them. Just great. And even my mother sent Colonel Hinckley a box of candy one time. I don't know what she was trying to do, butter him up or what. But no. You can have a turn.
Well, how about just telling us that you were a clerk in the squadron intelligence. What were some of the things you did?
We'll get the maps ready. You know, they put on a big map in the briefing room, and the pilots wanted to carry these little folding maps, and we'd take grease pencils, you know, and write or mark where they're going to go and stuff. I remember that, and they'd fold them up so they could keep track of where they're supposed to be, I guess. Other than that, it was just the routine. I didn't have to do the briefing. It was up to the officer, Lieutenant Gray. Well, the 3 squadrons went to group headquarters and got the information on the mission, and then they would brief the pilots. My job was just to keep records. But
Okay. I think a lot of things you've answered already. When were you discharged?
November 11th, 1945.
How did you get back to the United States?
We came back on, it was a victory ship. Can't think of the name of it. Oh man, it was awful. We came back in, what the hell was it? Can't remember. I know it was in the spring, and the ocean was rough. I got seasick the first day out. Oh, we left from Brussels, and coming down the channel, Smitty said, "Come on, kid, we'll go up and look at the White Cliffs of Dover." And we're looking at the White Cliffs of Dover, and I said to Smitty, "Hey, you know, I'm going to be sick." And I was. I couldn't eat after that. I'd start up the steps. We had to pass the kitchen, you know. The smell of food, I'd turn right. Smitty would bring down, I remember he brought up a can of peanuts once and some oranges. I lost about 20 or 25 pounds in that short time. We were 13 days coming home, so I remember I weighed out of the service at 176. In fact, the day that we were at I can't think of the camp up the Hudson where we landed, we didn't land there, they took us there, and they were lining us up to take us down to Dick's for discharge. I'm standing in the front line, I passed right out cold. Well, I won't get out today, I guess. And the sergeant was real nice. He sent a Jeep over and they drove me down to the train. And we got down to Dick's and were discharged. And Smitty, because of being an S, he was going to get out late. So he said, "Hey kid, you go and get a room in New York City and meet me at Penn Station this evening." Couldn't get any rooms. And I was in the Pennsylvania hotel, and the clerk said, I said, "You don't have any rooms?" "No, but go over there. See that man standing there? Go over and ask him. This man ran the Turkish bath." He said, "That's no problem. When you meet your buddy, come on in." So we slept in this great big room, went swimming, went in the hot room, and someone came in with a long scrub brush and scrubbed us up. Then you go swimming, and the room was comfortable. It was soft lights and stuff. And the next day we did find a hotel room, and we went to call on one of our pilot friends. It was Joe Kelly. He lived in New York City. We went to his father, I think. Well, we were on Wall Street anyway. And they said, "No, he's at the barber shop." So she told us where to go, and we're going down the steps, and you look in, and here's Joe Kelly in the barber chair. Off comes the bib, out he comes. Boy, I'll tell you, we reunion. "Hey, you guys got to stay and go to lunch with Dad." Well, it got to be, we'd been in New York a couple days or 3, and Smitty wanted to get to Buffalo, and my mother was over in Massachusetts, so we passed up the chance to go to lunch on Wall Street. Another one that was really funny, his name is O'Reilly, and he's in there in the names that I brought. We were walking down Grand Central, you know, 4 stairways come down, and there's this big rotunda thing. Anyway, I said to Smitty, "Hey, there's John O'Reilly." He had a Navy nurse or something on his arm. Well, you talk about men hugging each other. we went, "Hey, you guys," and boy, I'll tell you, he was as glad to see us as we were to see him. And he was from Syracuse originally. And there again, I talked to him a lot because he used to date a girl in Watertown. So when we saw O'Reilly, he said, be sure you go see Kelly. O'Reilly and Kelly were good buddies. They both flew. And so we went to see Kelly, and he took us up Park Avenue somewhere, one of those fancy places. But they were such ordinary nice guys, you know, nothing phony about them. But as I say, it was quite an experience to meet one kid when we were in Richmond. His name was Shirley Thomas. I'd never forgotten him. Apparently his family must have had a lot of money. They sent his car to him. And we were only going to be there about 2 or 3 months. He was from Texas. He didn't go overseas with us.
Did you make use of the GI Bill at all after you left service?
Yeah, I went to business school for a year and a half.
How about the 52-20 club?
Was that where they gave us $20 a week?
For 52 weeks, yes.
Oh, I didn't go 20 or 52 weeks.
Well,
but I did sign up when I was first home. Yeah.
Did you, you did mention you did stay in contact with people you served with?
Oh, yeah. And Larry Charbonneau was one of them. And then tonight I've got to call this fellow in Texas. His name was Blaker. He was one of our pilots, and I've been in touch with him, and mainly because his son, who I met in Colorado, he had to have a liver transplant or something, and I was interested enough to keep track of him. No, there are 5 or 6 of them that still call, but our
and you've
numbers
attended reunions, I know you
Oh,
said
yeah.
earlier.
We're supposed to go to a place called Seversville in Tennessee. It's
Yes.
near Dolly Parton's. Do you know it?
Yes, I know.
Do you?
I know where it is, yes.
Well,
My
that's-
son lives in Nashville, so.
Oh, well, that's what I've heard is the site for our reunion this year.
Yeah. It's a nice place.
Yeah?
I do like it. When was your first reunion? When did you attend your first reunion?
Well, the first time we got together, it wasn't an official reunion. This Hinckley, who lived in Warrenton, Virginia, I guess he had a business in Syracuse, or in Washington, a bunch of us gathered at some hotel for an afternoon of just reminiscing. And there wasn't much to that except just how are you doing and this sort of thing. But the funny part, not funny, it was kind of foolish. One of the fellows who'd been in our squadron, Henry J. Donovan, he was in the police department in Detroit. So at this little gathering, we were having fun, laughing, and Henry J. Donovan comes over and he said, everything all right over here? Well, yeah. Well, things get out of order. He hauls out his pistol. I said, put that thing away and get away from us. He was going to show him who he was. He's died just recently. But let's see, I can't remember the first reunion. Where the hell was it? We went to Boston one year. We've been to Richmond, Colorado Springs, Sacramento, somewhere in Oregon, Minneapolis. Last year we were in Las Vegas, and this year. At first we were doing them every 2 years, and I guess they decided that that wasn't enough. They wanted to get together and win that war every year, There
was one other thing I was going to ask. I can't think what it is. Oh, well, I know you mentioned this before. You do belong to a veterans organization.
VFW and the American Legion. Yep.
Have you been a member since you left service, or is this?
Yep. Well, our postmaster, who was a World War I veteran, when we first came home, come on, you guys, sign up for the Legion. So I've been a 50-year member for quite a few years, and it was one of those things. We didn't have a home or anything when we first got home from the service, but we'd meet, and then we'd put together a little shack sort of thing, and it was all volunteer labor, of course. And we've got a real nice Legion now, but it's different. It's in the people that are in the Legion in our place, and I think it's all over maybe. They're not looking to help the Legion or do anything patriotic. They're looking, what's in it for me? Because one guy told me that he and another fellow charged $800 to shovel the roof one winter. And this other guy sitting next to me, he'd been in Vietnam. $800, I'd do it all winter for that. But no, that's what's happening, I think, is my opinion of the Legions is that there isn't the feeling that we did this together. Of course, there aren't many of us that did it together, you know, and it's more of a social get-together for...
I know you've kind of answered this, but how do you think your service changed or affected your life?
I don't know, really. I appreciated the opportunity to see what I saw and to meet the people I've met and stay friends with so many of them. It's been a wonderful experience. And two other things. In Miami Beach, I saw Lily Pons, the opera star. Well, when I was a kid, my dad loved music, and I used to listen to the radio. Lily Pons sang, and I'd listen with Dad. And then this one night, it was a Starlight concert, and I went to see it. Of course, real proud to write home and tell my dad that I'd seen Lily Pons. And then when I was taking music lessons, on Monday night, Grace Moore used to have a radio program. And I wanted to hear that. But my music teacher, he was like me, he couldn't stop talking. He'd come at 7, and at 9 o'clock, he'd still be there giving me piano lessons. I'd say, Ward, we're going to stop at 7 o'clock so we can hear Grace Moore. And damned if when I was in Germany, in Bayreuth, I guess they call it, I saw her in person, which, I mean, that impressed me to be able to relay that home, you know. But
Now, did you see her in a USO show? Or
no, she appeared at the Opera House in Bayreuth.
did you ever go to any USO?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Saw Dorothy McGuire. What the hell was it? Her movie was Dear Ruth or something. Saw her on the Riviera. I got a pass down to the Riviera. Went for a week and stayed 3. They couldn't get a plane out. But one day I was walking down, I thought, I know that gal. And sure, it was Dorothy McGuire. But those things didn't mean anything to you, but, you know, to a kid from the country, see these bigwigs, boy.
Did you have any pictures to show us?
Oh, I didn't think you wanted to look at
Yeah.
pictures. Golly.
If you've got some, sure.
No, I don't have. I brought just those things that I gave you on the pilots. And I've got a couple of that. In fact, I was looking through what I was thinking of doing, and I probably should have followed through, find a picture of the pilot that goes with his name and, you know, put it on there. I didn't do it, but I can if I can. I got loads of pictures, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to make a few copies and mail them to us.
Oh, really?
We'd appreciate that, yes.
Would you want just the pilots from New York State?
Yes, that you sent us things on, and we also have some pictures of you in uniform and so on.
Oh,
So, okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
well, thank you for listening.
And